Now we're live on Facebook.
Avi, you are a star. Hi, Avi. Hi. I think she sees us and kind of like, hi, Avi. Look at that onesie. Are you too big for that onesie? Is she too big for that onesie already?
Well,
She is.
No, actually, she's growing into it. She's small.
Okay.
She's almost 6 months old, and she's just now wearing 3 months clothes.
Oh.
Thank you.
All right.
You gonna dance with Daddy during our intro music?
We have 1 minute to showtime, except on Facebook. Hi, Facebook. We're getting ready to go. It looks like we have a lot of people in the waiting room. Ellie, have you sent a message to the waiting room just in case we don't recognize?
I have not, but I have a message ready to go. I recognize everybody.
Okay, yeah.
Can you show everyone that you put
Tom.
the question on?
Tom Bennick.
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good.
Do we have a link to the survey that we're going to do as well? Like if somebody.
Survey Monkey?
Yeah.
We haven't put it up on Survey Monkey yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
We will have that up by tomorrow morning.
Okay. And we can send it out. We can send it out to everybody.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Let's do that. We'll talk about that.
Okay.
We'll talk about how to do that. And Facebook too. We want to hear from you, Facebook.
Yes, we do.
We want you. Look at that. That's like Uncle Sam. Uncle Sam wants you.
All right. Just about ready. I'll start the music and start letting people in.
Hey, welcome everybody. Welcome to VBC at Home Live on this Wednesday, June 24th, the eve of the 70th anniversary of the beginning of the Korean War, which will be our episode today. This is the 70th anniversary of the Korean War episode. My name is Todd. I'm the director of the Veterans Breakfast Club, and VBC at Home Live is a production of the Veterans Breakfast Club. We are a nonprofit here in Western Pennsylvania, and our mission is to gather veterans with the public and have the veterans share stories. And we've been doing this for 12 years. We've been doing it for 3 months virtually, but for 12 years live, face-to-face, in person. But we shifted to all virtual 90 days ago. And so this is, you know, we're kind of pulling out of our learning phase. And I think everything's getting a little bit better. We've got a theme song and we have our staff here, and I will introduce them in no particular order. Over here on my screen is Ellie DiPastino. Hi, Ellie. She is our communications and web design and media producer person. Over here, we have Avi Hall. Hi, Avi. How are you?
Hi, Avi.
She's the youngest member of our group here. Look at that onesie. Man, that is a great onesie, a VBC onesie. And she's also dragged along Sean Hall, who happens to be our director of programming. Hi, Sean. How are you?
Hi.
How old is Avi?
I'm sorry?
How old is Avi?
She's 5.5 months.
5.5 months. What a sweetie. Oh my gosh. What branch of service do you want her to join?
Air Force.
You're a good dad. Okay, good, good. We have Libby DiPastino over there. She's our summer intern. And then we have Lauren Del Ricci. Hi, Lauren. She's our associate director. And again, this is VBC at Home Live. I know we still people entering from the waiting room. People are continuing to join us on Facebook Live. Do we have anybody who could lead us in the national anthem? Lee Corfield, is he out there? Matt Kelly, is he out there? I guess not. Should we go to Avi? Is she just volunteer for that?
Yeah, but it won't be that great. So
let's go with Marianne Mangini, shall we? To lead us in the national anthem. And I'll share my screen. We could have a flag right here. Oh, maybe I can't share my screen, correct, Elle?
Correct.
All right, I'll stop that because you have to share your screen.
Correct.
All right.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Wonderful, wonderful. Marianne Mangini is wonderful. And Ellie, if you, once again, if you could share mariannemangini.com down below, if people want to get in touch with her. She's a wonderful local singer here in Western Pennsylvania. And she recorded that especially for us. And she recorded that because we've been doing these events for almost exactly 90 days. It was on March 25th that we did our first virtual storytelling event. And we've been doing them in one form or another about 3 days a week ever since then. So we've done, 30, 35 of these events. And we're starting to get curious about how it's going over, what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong, maybe if there are better times or days of the week to offer these programs, and whether there are subjects that you would like to see covered on BBC at Home Live that we haven't covered yet. We'd like to ask you all those questions. We want to have you share your thoughts on the programming that we've been doing, how we can improve. We want you to be honest. So we have a poll that we developed, a short poll that I'm going to launch now. And everybody here on the Zoom side will be able to respond to the poll. And I believe everybody now is looking at it, can see it. And if you wouldn't mind kind of filling it out, it shouldn't take too long. And then if you have anything else to add, if you have any suggestions, feel free to put them in the chat. And Ellie, if you'd like, you could put my email in the chat. I could also do that. I'm not that incompetent. So you could email me directly if you want, or you could have your suggestions be anonymous. However you'd like to do it. We really do want to get your honest feedback. Some of you have already offered some wonderful feedback that has really helped. I absolutely take it all very seriously. You will not offend me. You will not offend me by saying, Todd, you should leave and Avi should be the MC of these events. That would be fine. I would understand that completely. You won't, any suggestions for improvements, any criticism that you have, I guarantee I will not be offended. People rarely ever complain to me. I usually have to get the complaints second or third hand. So it would be really helpful if you would just let me know kind of what we can improve, what we can make better. So that while that is up, I also want to say, I think people are going through and answering them. While that is up, I do want to pitch our VBC Coffee Hour, which is tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. It's at the same Zoom channel. And Ellie, if you want to put the link in the chat for our coffee hour tomorrow and on the Facebook side as well. This is an informal hour of kind of conversation and storytelling. There's no set program. people make announcements, people kind of, joke around, and we always share a story or two. That the conversation very quickly comes back to everybody's military service, and it's a really cool kind of vibe to that event, because it's laid back, it's not simulcast on Facebook, and so it's a kind of a more intimate group. So please do join us if you can. This is our VBC Coffee Hour every Thursday at 9 a.m. So tomorrow, June 25th at 9 a.m. will be our coffee hour. And I was wondering, Elle, do you think that it's possible that I could share my screen while people are answering a poll, or is that a bad idea?
Not sure if that's possible, but you could try.
I could give it a try, right? Okay, here I go. I'm going to give it a try here, because as you're answering the poll, I thought I would just kind of set a little bit of context to our discussion today. Tomorrow will be the 70th anniversary of the beginning of the Korean War, and that is on June 25th, 1950. 75,000 North Korean People's Army troops swamped over the 38th parallel into non-communist South Korea in an attempt to reunify Korea under communist rule, the entire Korean peninsula. It was a surprise attack. The South didn't know it was coming. The South was very poorly prepared in comparison to the North for this attack. And as you can see from the animated map on the right, you could just see that how seesawing this war was in its first year. It was a war of dramatic turns, of dramatic attacks and counterattacks. The North Vietnamese, the North Korean People's Army kind of swamped over the South, really took it over, all but a little perimeter around Pusan. It was called the Pusan Perimeter. And it was at the Pusan Perimeter that the first U.S. troops engaged in the counterattack to assist the South Vietnamese, the Republic of Korea soldiers. The Republic of Korean army was small and poorly trained. The United States decided early on, within days of June 25th, that it would respond in force. And it got a UN resolution. So it was a multinational force that landed in South Korea to protect South Korea from the invasion of the North. And by July, there were a large number of US troops on the ground in Korea, and the Korean War was on. And it would be a 3-year, very bloody war. The first year was seesawing back and forth. So with an attack, a surprise landing at Incheon, led by Douglas MacArthur, the Americans landed large forces that quickly liberated Incheon and Seoul and tried to trap the North Koreans down south. Weren't able to do it. The North Koreans pulled back up to the north. The UN forces pursued them all the way up to the Chinese border, the Yalu River. And it was then in late 1950 that the North Korean army counterattacked along with 400,000 Chinese soldiers. So this became a real multinational war on this little peninsula in Korea, counterattacked all the way south again, crossing the 38th parallel. And then there was a counterattack that brought the fighting really kind of to a draw at the 38th parallel where the two countries were divided. And in June 1951, 1 year after the beginning of the war, the peace talks started. And it would take 2 years of those peace talks. It never did reach a peace. Instead, they reached a ceasefire on July 27, 1953, stopping for a while, creating an armistice, a ceasefire between the two sides. As many of you know, this war is actually still technically going on and has been going on. So those of you who served in Korea after the shooting stopped in 1953, you were entering a war zone where the war could come back and start up again at any time. If you read the news, if you follow the papers, you'll know that's it's always a possibility. So this was a kind of dramatic, seesawing, very bloody war. You see the casualty statistics here before you. It was a war that really had three major goals from the American perspective, and some of the priorities of these goals were shifting. Number one, to free South Korea of North Korean occupation. Number two, and this was a goal that emerged during the war, it was to liberate North Korea of communist rule. And number three, and this is very important and it's often forgotten when talked about the Korean War, the third goal of this war was not to start World War III. The US achieved two of those three goals. Harry Truman had an eye on that third goal, that one of not allowing this little war to turn into World War III. That would be a catastrophe. The Soviet Union by 1950 had nuclear weapons. These were now two heavily armed nuclear powers, and Truman was afraid, with good reason, that this war, if he intervened in Korea, it might escalate into World War III. And the American people were also concerned about that. Remember, 1950, it was only 5 years removed from the end of World War II. Americans had lived through a long, very bloody, very painful catastrophe called World War II. They weren't very eager to start up another war. And so in order not to excite the population or to stoke fear in the country or even in the Soviet Union, Harry Truman and the US government deliberately kind of played down this war. They didn't even call it a war. They called it, if some of you are old enough to remember the Korean War, it was called a police action. And there wasn't, the news was certainly covered about the war going on in Korea, but it wasn't always front page news. And it kind of was a sideshow in people's lives back home on the home front. Nothing like World War II had been. And while that really made sense to avoid World War III from breaking out and to avoid kind of stoking fear in the American population, I think that playing down of the war, calling it a police action, not having the war in Americans' faces every day like World War II was, it really was a disservice to those who fought and bled in Korea. Because when these veterans came home, reintegrating back into civilian life was tough. And it wasn't that they got kind of necessarily the disrespect and the total neglect that Vietnam War veterans got when they returned home. But they just kind of quizzical answers. I mean, quizzical kind of looks. Where have you been? I remember Paul Ibeck, one of our Korean War veterans, said something like he got home and a friend of his said like, "Hey, Paul, I haven't seen you for a while. Where have you been?" He said, "I was in Korea for a year." And the friend said, "Oh," and just kept walking. Somebody else said to one of our vets, "Oh, good thing you were in Korea because we had a lot of snow here in Pittsburgh in the winter of 1950-51. Those kind of comments, kind of expressions of cluelessness about what was happening in the Korean War. And I think our Korean War vets have really lived with that kind of absence of recognition. Korean War is in many ways a forgotten war. It was a war fought by a generation we call often the silent generation, because they weren't as visible as Vietnam War veterans were, and they weren't as visible as World War II veterans were. So that is my kind of historical context that I'm giving for our program today, and kind of setting up our guests, because our guests are going to be Korean War veterans. And again, I will point you to the casualty lists here on the slide. You'll see that total killed, military and civilian, 5 million people. And this is not a large population. Total US personnel killed about 36,000, over 36,500. And then there were over 100,000 US personnel wounded in action. So this was quite a big bloody war, but that did not get the kind of attention that World War II had gotten just 5 years earlier. So I do want to kind of welcome our guests, and we're going to start the storytelling. We have quite a few number of, let's see, how is this poll going? My submit button doesn't work, says Larry. Okay,
I believe that if you have not answered all the questions, it's possible the submit button won't work, but we will be doing this survey over the next week or so. So if you don't have a chance right now to submit, we'll make sure to scratch out any bugs, and we'll have the poll up again. So if you did not have a chance to complete it, you definitely will in an upcoming VBC at Home. Thank you.
Okay, and Sean, also, I know the last question is a little weird because it's an open-ended question, and but it's I just want people to be able to kind of write whatever they want, but the poll kind of structure didn't allow that. So I put free response, free response. If people don't click that, will it not submit?
It's possible. So yeah, if you just click one of the free responses and then maybe able to hit submit then, and if you have something you'd like to say, just add it to our chat, or you can email us as well.
Okay, well, very good. Well, we have some Korean War veterans with us today. We have Chuck Turisky, who is in the Army. I know he joined us. I saw him and Donnie joining us for the first time. We have John Yates, who's in the Navy. We have Don McElrath, who I see with Bert Kennedy here. He was Army. We have Bob Harbula, who was Marine Corps. And I see Bob. He's under Scott Harbula. Hi, Bob. It's good to see you. And then we have Curtis Copeland, whose father served as a Navy corpsman. And I want them all to get a chance to share a bit of their story. I'm going to bring up, let's see, I'm going to bring up Chuck Turitsky first. Oh, and I see Rosetta's with us. Hi, Rosetta. You're friends with the Turitskys. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us. Let's see if we can get, where are the Turitskys? Donnie, did they leave us? Oh, no, there you are. Gosh, I have problems with my eyesight. Chuck, it's been so long since I've seen you. It's good to see you. Okay, I'm going to have to unmute. Ellie, what do you think? Can we unmute?
You should get, yeah, you should see a button on your screen that's asking you to unmute yourself. There we go.
I see.
There we go. Hi,
Okay.
Chuck. Hi, Donnie.
Hi.
How you doing?
Good. It's
Good.
been so long since I've seen you.
I know.
Good to see you.
Yeah, very good to see you. I
Yes,
want to,
good to see you.
hey, I want to share my screen and show a picture of you when you were drafted, correct? There you are on the far left.
That's,
Yeah, right.
Who's
that's
in
his
that
dad
picture?
and his brother.
My dad was in World War II, and my brother joined the Navy a couple years after I went to Korea.
So this is when you were back home.
No,
Yeah,
no,
that was the day we got married.
that was the day we got married. We all put on our uniforms.
Oh, how wonderful. Your dad must have been so proud.
Yeah,
His other brother was in the Marine Corps and wasn't at the wedding.
So Chuck, were you drafted into the Army?
oh yeah, kicking and screaming.
Kicking and screaming. What year?
53.
Okay, 53. So towards the end of the shooting war in Korea.
Yeah, I was supposed to go overseas while the war was still going on. But when I took my radio course, I was a high-speed radio operator. They said, oh, you'll probably get a good place to spend your time because high-speed operators were in short supply. So I come out fifth, I think, in my class of, I don't know, 60, 70 guys. And then they said, well, we're going to send you to Monmouth for some kind of security training. And then they closed Monmouth down because somebody broke in up there for some reason. And they, for security purposes, they said, we're going to shut the whole thing down. So instead of spending some time in Monmouth and then going overseas, I spent like 3 or 4 months down in Camp Gordon. And by the time I got to Korea, they were just getting over it. Just getting over it.
And did they need any high-speed radio operators when you got to Korea?
They told me they did, but when I got to Korea, they asked me when I got to my outfit, you want to be a cook or a truck driver? This is the Army way. So I said, I would rather be a radio operator, sir. And he sort of looked at me like, why would you want to be a radio operator? But heck, that's what I trained for.
That's what you would train for, right?
But then the guy who was the head of the communications in our outfit, and I still correspond with this guy. He's from Iowa, and he's as old as I am probably now, and he's now in a nursing home, I think. But we still correspond a couple times a year. And he told the lieutenant, he says, sir, I think I got 2 guys rotating back to the States in about a month. I can probably get this guy ready in about a month. So I said, hey, I raised my hand. I says, I'll go. So, but in our outfit though, it was 155 guns. They were the long toms, and we needed voice, not radio, not code. So what we used to do is we'd sit down at the thing at the shack overnight, and we'd talk with guys up and down the valley who were also high speed radio operators, and just chew the breeze, a little bit, because it kept some, when you were on guard duty or something like that, and you were in the radio shack, it kept the time and made the time go a little faster. So this guy was a good guy. He was a real good guy.
When you arrived in, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Chuck, but when you arrived in Korea, the armistice, the ceasefire had been signed, I believe.
Yeah,
just been signed.
It was July. It was I don't know. July 19th, I think, was a ceasefire.
I think it was July 27th.
27th. Okay. I know we go down to the point, or we go downtown to Pittsburgh all the time for the when the
ceremony.
At
Korean veterans.
Korean veterans meet
right
down at the memorial.
Right.
And there's a guy from Monroeville. He's a reverend of some kind, but he's Korean, so he comes down all the time. And then the tuna people. Starkist Tuna is owned by the Korean company.
Right.
And every year in August, they throw us a bash. It's a luncheon just around around the middle of the day. And it's sometimes it's lobster, sometimes it's T-bones, sometimes it's, always top shelf.
It's always top shelf, never canned tuna.
Right? No.
Chuck, so when you arrived in Korea, the shooting had stopped, but the expectation was it was going to start again. I mean, it was a tenuous ceasefire, and the tension was still really, really, really high on the 38th parallel, as it remains high today. What was your first impression when you landed in Korea? Because you landed right when this huge destructive war had just kind of ended. Did you see some of that destruction?
Oh, the whole countryside, it seemed like, looked like World War II. In other words, they had shot every building up, every city up. Seoul looked like, well, I guess you can compare it to the WW2 when they used to level buildings back and forth. And we got on a train in Busan, and there was a bunch of kids on the dock, and they were trying to sell us stuff. And one kid had a half a leg, and he had a crutch. God, I had never seen anything like that. And that moved me. He seemed to be doing okay because he was selling stuff to anybody who would buy on the train. Like I said, going through the countryside there, it was all shot up. Seoul now looks beautiful. It looks like any city you would see in this country now. So they've done a heck of a job.
And here you are, I believe, in Korea. There's you on the left.
Yeah, and it's Chung Jin-kook on the right. Oh, no, wait, that was Anthony from New Jersey.
Yeah, that's Anthony.
Yeah, okay. Chung Jin-kook was a kid who was from Korea, and he was a Katusa, Korean Army training with the USA. And that's him on the right. Yeah.
Right.
And these guys would come and train with us for 3 or 4 months. They liked the food because they didn't get very good food. And they filled the mess hall when we had liver.
Oh, gosh. Oh, how
yeah,
funny.
GIs wouldn't eat liver. We would go to the PX and grab something. And these guys, the Katusa, and we had houseboys who did our laundry and stuff like that. They'd all flock to the mess hall because they knew when the liver was coming. And they'd sit down at the table and eat a pile of liver as big as you are.
Wow. I mean,
Yeah.
the Korean people were starving, and
Yeah.
there were a lot of orphans everywhere. And I've certainly
Everywhere.
heard about that they would then kind of be adopted by, American troops who would use them as houseboys. And
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
wow, we.
They had to get clearance, I think, because they didn't want these guys, sending stuff to the North Koreans that we only wanted to keep under our hat.
Right.
So I think these guys had to all get clearance, and then they would send them to whatever outfit needed them.
Were you in Korea for about a year?
Yeah, 12, 14 months.
14
Two
months.
Christmases.
Two Christmases.
Yeah, that was sad. To me, that was the hardest part of it, because even though I had a girlfriend back home at the time.
Not Donnie.
Not Donnie.
Then we will not talk about her then.
No, we won't talk about this girlfriend. She was dating an Air Force guy, and she was dating my buddy, who was in the Army with me, but he never went overseas.
She was dating everybody.
She was dating everybody. I think she was casting her bread on the water. Or she was trolling me.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but
Her loss is my gain.
yeah.
So when you came home, did you get a Dear John letter, or did you kind of learn that you were yesterday's news when you came home?
No, she waited till we went out on a date, and then she sort of told me, like, I think I'm going to marry this Air Force guy. I said,
Okay.
Dang, beat up by the Air Force again. They get the best of everything. No, I got the best of everything.
That's right. Good save there. Good save there,
Yeah.
Chuck. Let me ask you, what was your homecoming like? I mean, I had said in my introductory remarks that people on the home front weren't really following the war that much, and so often when you came home, it's kind of, they didn't know what to ask you. They didn't really talk much. Did you talk much about your experiences?
No, because I didn't have anybody that I knew in Pittsburgh. Most of the guys that I went over there with, they were from out Midwest, Iowa and places. My other buddy was up in Idaho. So most of the guys that I served time with over there, they were from outfits that were further on out west. So like you said, you were right on. You were spot on when people said, "Where have you been? I haven't seen you around." Like that, because they didn't know.
Right.
Not much was being printed in the papers. And when I rode home, I never told my mom anything about what was going on, because I know she worried. And I kept that between me and the ex-girlfriend.
Right.
And like you say, people want to know where you were.
Right. So you didn't really like, people didn't really ask you much about it, and
No, there was no parades.
No parades.
Just me.
Are you glad? Did you know Chuck at that time, Donnie?
No, I
No,
didn't.
she didn't.
How did you meet?
We met at the Dairy Queen when he was flirting with me.
I used to go to the Dairy Queen after I played golf all the time, and I'd pick up a milkshake and just to get hydrated again. And I had walked 18 holes all the time. So then, like she said, when you asked for a second milkshake, she said, "I knew I had you." I was a one milkshake guy. But that day, I was a two milkshake guy.
He kept flirting with me, Todd.
You guys are so great.
Until she let me catch her.
That's good. And how long have you been married?
63 years.
63 years. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
We've been fortunate. We have been very fortunate. We haven't had a whole, everybody has their things that go wrong with them, but we've been very fortunate that we've lived as long as we have. That's all I can think.
And we're fortunate to know you and to hear your story. I've known you for quite some time, and it's just, you two are just a joy to be around. And I'm sad I haven't seen you in so long. Let me ask you one final question, Chuck.
Yes.
And that is, I'm trying to figure out how to ask it. Are you glad you did it? I mean, you were dragged into the Army kicking and screaming. You had this experience in a very poor country in a dangerous, uncomfortable situation. Are you glad you did it?
Definitely.
Why?
Definitely. They shaped me up. The Army
Really?
shaped me up. Yeah. Well, when you go away to the Army, you do 8 weeks of intensive training before you get sent. Like I got sent to radio school to learn code and learn how to type. But the first 8 weeks I spent down there was all conditioning. When I left there, I was in the best shape of my life. And up till then, I had never thought about, conditioning or anything like that. It was a guy generally around my time, we were just looking for girls. So we got to the Army and we got down south, and down there, it's no dogs or soldiers allowed on the lawn. So it wasn't like you could go to town and pick any girls up. I was down at right outside Augusta, right outside the where they play the Masters.
It's Fort Gordon.
Fort Gordon, no, it's Fort Gordon now. It was Camp
Right.
Gordon. Then,
Camp
yeah.
Gordon then.
Yeah, yeah, I was in the best shape of my life when they got done with me.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean,
Chuck,
you're up at 6 o'clock in the morning. You worked and worked till about 6 o'clock at night. And then they turn you loose. You just flop onto your bunk.
right. Then get up the next morning, do it again.
Do it again.
Right.
Yeah. You had the weekends off.
Well, thank you, Chuck, for sharing just some of your memories here on this anniversary of the 70th anniversary of the beginning of the Korean War. I hope you'll stay with us because I know we'll have
Yes, I
some
will.
questions for vets. So
Yes,
thank
we
you very
will.
much. I hope
Thank
you'll
you,
join us
Chuck.
again.
Yes, we will.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, talk to someone else.
Yeah. Well, I didn't know that you were doing this until the other.
And I just wanted to say, Donnie, Rick Arisman said it's really good to see you. He's watching on Facebook. It's good to see Donnie and Chuck. It's been a long time. So you have some adoring fans out here on the Facebook side. So hi from Rick.
Looks like
Did we lose
the
Todd
host-
again?
Yes, looks like he accidentally shut his computer down.
We're gonna
Joining us in a second.
we're gonna have to start doing man overboard drills.
Do you not see me? I am here.
Ah, there he is. Where'd you go, boss?
I tell you, I'd fire myself if I could. Oh my gosh.
Bobby
How
might
confident-
take issue with that.
How I absolutely, yes. I was trying to do something else and I pretty much shut down my computer. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. So John Yates, I know that you're, hi, John, good to see you. Let's spotlight John. Let's unmute John. How are you, John? Let's get John unmuted here.
Here, I'll just see if I can.
Oh, I hear you, John. How are you?
Can you hear me now?
I do hear you. I do hear you. And I'm going to share my screen so that people can see you as a young sailor right there. Is that you?
That's me.
Wow. How old were you?
Well, at that time, I was probably about 18.
18 years old when you joined the Navy?
Yes, that's
And-
correct.
Why did you choose the Navy?
Well, I don't know. I had brothers that were in the Navy in World War II. And so I just kind of had that in my mind. Had I not gone to the Navy, of course, the draft was in effect and would have probably ended up in the Army shortly after that.
And what year did you join?
1952.
Okay, so right in the middle of the Korean War, and you kind of casually mentioned your brothers. This is actually quite a story in itself. Here are all the Yates boys in uniform. 10 of you served in the military in either World War II or the Korean War, correct?
That's correct. 7 in World War II and 3 of us in the Korean War.
I want people to look at that. That's 10 young men from one family, 10 brothers in the military. All I could think of truly, John, is your poor mother. How did your mother deal with it?
Well, I don't know. She just had to, I guess.
I guess so.
It was difficult, I'm sure.
You were one of the younger brothers?
Yes, I was next to the youngest.
Did any of your older brothers give you any advice when you joined the Navy?
Well, not really advice. We'd talk about from time to time, but I wouldn't say any advice. I kind of knew what was going on.
You ended up on the USS Tarawa, a
Yeah,
aircraft carrier.
that's correct. That's it. USS Tarawa. Actually, the official name was Tarawa, and it was named after a World War II battle at the Tarawa Islands.
And here, this picture was taken December 18th, 1952. I believe you were probably on this ship when the photo was taken.
Well, I didn't go aboard ship until about close to 53 because, 12 weeks of training, and I spent a little bit of time in Pensacola Naval Air Base.
Right.
And then from there, I went aboard ship.
And what was your job aboard ship?
I was in the radar division. I had gone to school for 3 or 4 months in Norfolk, Virginia, and from there, I went aboard ship.
And what was it like serving on an aircraft carrier with how many men? 4,000, 3,000, 5,000?
Well, actually, I think it was around 4,000, and we had also a company of 200 Marines for security reasons.
And, I mean, it's the kind of thing. It's like a little city, a little floating city, and I've just met veterans who've served on carriers who've had gone to carrier reunions and met all kinds of people who served with them, but they never met them because the ship was so big, never even ran into each other. It's a different experience serving on a carrier or, battleship than on a smaller ship with just several hundred people, huh?
We had about 60 sailors in what they call the OI division.
Right.
That was the radar division, and most of your contacts were the people in your division.
Right.
You'd see other people that you made friends with, but most of them were in your own division.
And
Basically, I probably knew 60 to 80 people out of 4,000.
Right. And what was the ship's mission during the Korean War? Were you part of that conflict?
Well, basically, our mission was to give the combat troops their support. We basically went up and down the coast of North Korea, giving them whenever they needed air support. That's what we did.
So the pilots were constantly flying off and then landing back on the carrier.
That's correct.
That's correct. And what kind of airplanes?
Well, they had two different kinds. First of all, there was about a total of 100 aircrafts, and half of them were fighter planes, but they did carry rockets and that kind of stuff. And the other half were kind of a combination fighter bomber planes. They carried a lot of bombs, and that was just the two types.
Right.
The fighters were jets. Jets were pretty new at that time, and the fighter bombers were props.
And weren't I see this is I guess you call it a straight deck aircraft carrier. Wasn't it shortly after this that the angled deck kind of came into?
That's correct. The picture shown there is a straight deck. And then before I got out of the service, we went into the Boston Navy Yards and they converted the ship from straight to, they put a canted deck on the, if you're looking from the bow of the ship backwards, the canted deck was on the right side.
Okay. So the angle was here, and that made it. What did the angle deck do exactly? Was it easier to land and take off, or was it you could have more planes? Do you know what the advantage was for the angled deck?
Well, the angled deck, it allowed the planes to take off, and we could also, one of the problems was that when the planes would come into land, we had landing wires, and the planes had hooks that caught the landing wires,
Right.
and that stopped the planes because when they hit the deck, they were going over 100 miles an hour.
Right.
So now the canted part, that allowed the planes to actually go in the air from the canted deck instead of the front of the deck or the front of the aircraft carrier. Up until the canted deck, all the planes took off from the front or the bow side.
Right. Okay. I was gonna here. Let me. I'll share with people, since we brought it up, what an angled deck looks like. I think this is the Coral Sea, and this is a angled deck right here.
Right. That's it.
Right. When one other thing I want to share with people before I let you go here is this wonderful map that you gave me, that you shared with me, of your cruise, the cruise 1953, 1954, a world cruise that you did on the Tarawa. And it has this line, I enhanced it in red, traced it in red here. You truly sailed around the world.
That's right. We did a complete tour around the world. We started off from Quonset Point, if you see where that's at. That's Quonset Point up in New England.
Right.
And what we did, we went down to Jacksonville, Florida, and took on the air groups. From there, we went over through Europe. You can see where Spain is located, through the Mediterranean Sea, then down through the Suez Canal, and then over. We ended up on, if you look at the left part there, we ended up at the on station off of North Korea. We also made a side trip down to Sydney and Wellington, New Zealand, and we spent about two weeks or so on that journey. You can see us where we went down south there in Australia.
You had to have some. You had to have some good liberties on that trip, huh?
Yes. Yeah, the Australians were very. They were very friendly to U.S. and that story goes back to World War II when the Navy stopped the Japanese from attempting to invade Australia.
Right. Right. And I'll ask you what I asked
Now,
Chuck.
coming back.
Oh, I'm sorry. What were you going to say?
No, I was just going to say, you can see we came across the Pacific there on the way home. We went into San Francisco, then through the Panama Canal, then back up to Quonset Point.
Wow.
That was our journey. We did a complete tour, world tour, I should say.
What was your favorite place that you saw on that world tour?
The favorite what?
A favorite place.
Oh. Well, I think most of the favorite places was in Europe. You can see all the different
Yes.
cities that we visited in Europe.
Yes. The Riviera, the Mediterranean basin there. Oh my.
Italy, France, and North Africa, and then down through the Suez.
John,
But,
I'll ask you what I asked Chuck is, are you glad you did it? How you been, was it 4 years that you ended up doing in the Navy?
4 years. Yes, I don't regret it. If I had to do it over again, I would.
You would do it, huh?
Yes. It was a good experience.
Wonderful. Well, thanks for joining us today, John. And I hope, again, like I said to Chuck, that you'll stay with us, because I think people will have questions. And please do feel free, if you're on the Facebook side, to ask some questions, or on the
Thank you.
Zoom side, put in the chat, raise your hand, ask some questions. Lauren and Ellie, feel free to chime in if you see a question here. Thank you, John.
You're welcome.
All right. Oh gosh, I almost did that again. I almost pushed the wrong button again, John. Oh boy, I need to get some education here on how this stuff works. Let's see. I know we have, I see you guys here. I'm going to spotlight Bert Kennedy. Hey, Bert. Hey, Don.
Now, wait a minute. Now we're on business.
Yeah, now you're in business. How are you?
Great.
Good. We see about half of each of you, which is good. So Bert.
Oh, you want the rest? Stop being high.
Bert is, he was Army. He served in the Army in Korea after the shooting had stopped in the late 1950s. I have some photos of Bert, and his wonderful photos of Bert, actually, that he's shared with me. I only have one photo of you, Don. And I'm going to share it here. Oh, that's it. That's what I was going to share. That's it. That's the picture. Yeah, you got it. Right there. There we go. There's you on the left, and there's you with some of your stripes and ribbons and medals. Don, were you drafted or did you volunteer?
I volunteered.
Why?
Yeah.
Well, my oldest brother joined the Army in 50.
Wow.
46, I take that back. And the next brother joined the Marines. He got out, so I went in. I wasn't a very good student, so I figured that would be the best thing for me.
In what year? Was it 50? 1950?
1951, I joined the Army.
You had to know when you joined that they were going to send you to Korea.
No, not really, but I took 17 weeks of basic training with the 82nd Airborne. Then I went to Benning and took 2 months of training on tanks. Then I went to Korea.
Wow. And what was your job in Korea?
I started out as a driver and a loader. The good thing about it, when I got there, we had a West Point officer. His name was Bastard, from Alabama or Georgia. One of the finest officers I've ever met. And I was on his tank. But these guys, when I got there, they were all up at the when the Marines came out of the reservoir, they were at Humnang. And they spent Christmas Day on the ship. Lifesavers for their Christmas dinner. And they all fought back up to where we joined them outside of Seoul.
So
a lot of these guys were from the Pittsburgh area, but they never joined our group.
And what was your unit?
The 15th Tank Company of the 3rd Division.
Of the 3rd Division. Okay. Yeah. And when you say you were a loader, what do you mean by that? Loading the cannon?
And usually we had 76s. Then we got the new tanks with 90 millimeter, the bigger gun, which was better. The 76 bounced off the tanks. That's what happened when they left the Koreans after World War II. They gave them stuff that wasn't even worthwhile leaving them.
Right.
But later on, we got the bigger tanks. But I was there when they integrated the Army. And a lot of people were, the Southerners were a little bit upset. But I went to Colony Trade School. 50% were Black, and we had no problems.
Yes, we were talking about this Monday night that Harry Truman signed Executive Order 9981, desegregating the military in July 1948, but it took 6 years to implement desegregation.
Yes.
So during the Korean War, some units were integrated and some were still segregated. So
Right.
You were in a racially integrated unit.
Yep, until they enforced the desegregation.
Right.
And it worked out just as well.
It worked out well.
Yes.
I noticed your combat infantry badge here in the frame that you're holding, right at the top. That's a very important medal. It just signifies that you were in combat. So I'll ask you, Don, do you remember the first time you were shot at, the first time, the war became real for you?
Yes, we were in support of the ROK division.
The
And,
Republic of Korea division.
yeah. And a tank company was attached to a regiment that entitled us to be able to get the CIB. But like I say, I was with this Lieutenant Bastard, fantastic man. And the North Korean chased us all over a hill. We were direct support for the ROKs, but nobody got hit. He was that good.
Did you have any close calls in the war in terms of getting hit?
Yeah, a few, but not too many. We had trouble with the mortars from the North Koreans and the Chinese. They were pretty good with it, but it wasn't bad really for us.
And can I ask you, just for the people who are watching who may not understand what makes mortars especially scary, is it that they drop in from like on top of you and you
Yes,
you can't
they
really?
were the big mortars. Some of them were our own mortars.
Oh, they were
Yeah.
they were landing on top of you.
Well, they
They were captured.
when our guys bugged out, a lot of that equipment went to the North Koreans and the Chinese, and they used it against us.
Wow. Wow.
$4.2.
How did you ended up being a sergeant here? How did
Yes.
did you get your stripes in Korea?
No, I came back a corporal and I got attached to the Ohio National Guard for 16 months.
Oh,
And that I got my stripes as a cadre. We had a Lieutenant Walker from Cleveland, and he was my platoon leader. Then he's the one that got me the stripes.
can I ask you what it was like to return home? Did you talk to people about it? Did people ask you about it?
No,
No,
no one asked.
not your friends, not your family.
Nope,
Why not, do you think?
I don't understand that, but I never volunteered it either.
You didn't volunteer it either.
Yeah.
Did you have any understanding about what the war was about when you went over? I mean, did you have any thoughts on it? Obviously this was the height of the Cold War. We were fighting communism. Did you know any more about that than any more about the war than that?
Not really, because I was 18. And like I said, I just got out of high school. So it's hard to say really if I knew that much about it. But I'm not sorry I went over.
I was just going to ask that. You're not sorry.
No,
Why not?
that was the best thing that ever happened to me when I joined the Army.
How could you say that? Why?
Well, they gave you a lot of information. I was in the best shape of my life after the 82nd Airborne. You never walked anywhere. And a lot of cadre were World War II. So you double timed everywhere you went. And then when I got to Benning, a lot of cadre were from Korea. So I was well trained.
You arrived well trained.
Yes.
How did it change you? How did your time in the military change you or shape your life?
It did. I think I matured a lot.
Really?
I learned a lot. The nice thing when I came back, I got the GI Bill. I got married eventually. I have 3 sons now and 4 grandchildren. None of them have been in the military.
Do they ask you about your service?
No, not really.
Maybe.
Anything they asked me about when I was out on atomic maneuvers out in Nevada, and they asked about that, but that was all.
Well, tell us about the atomic maneuvers. What was that?
Well, what happened, they would pick so many people from different divisions, and we went out to Camp Desert Rock, Nevada, and you would get into a trench. They would give you the badge for radiation. They tell you, okay, put your back to the wall. The bomb will go off and be a bright flash. Then you walk to ground zero to see the damage.
Wow.
And It was powerful.
And so they measured your exposure to radiation with a
Yeah.
badge.
Some guys had more and some of us had less. But we were there for about 3 weeks
Oh my gosh.
because when it was windy, they couldn't put the bomb off. I
Wow.
got down to Vegas. I got to see Vegas and stuff like that there.
Is that why you have such a glow now?
Oh, yeah.
Could you feel the heat?
Yeah. But the nice thing about that, like I say, that regiment I was in, the company, a lot of those guys were from Western Pennsylvania. And none of them ever joined our group.
Somebody asked, could you feel the heat of the bomb?
No.
You could not.
The wave, the force of it. You stood up with your back to it and it would more or less move you.
The sonic wave.
Yeah.
Wow. Wowee. And how old are you, Don?
I'm 80. Oh, I don't know.
Too damn.
I'll be 87. I'll be 88, really.
88. So it couldn't have hurt you that much if you're 88 and you're in great shape. I know it's been a while since I've seen you, but I guess I saw you in March at our very last event. Weren't you at the Point Park event? That's right.
Yeah.
That's
We're
right.
still waiting for breakfast. My $5 breakfast.
I know, you're not the first one to say that. For those of you who don't know, that we made a big deal advertising that all our breakfasts, the breakfast buffets in 2020 were going to be $5. And it just so happens we haven't had a breakfast in 2020. We just had one. And so there's a lot of conspiracy theories out there that somehow we had something to do with the COVID-19 and so that we could avoid having to, pay for these breakfasts. Yeah, we feel badly about. Thanks for bringing that up, Don. I appreciate
Okay.
And I was going to say, please do stay with us because we do want people to ask questions of our veterans here. And I'm going to call up, if I can. I saw Curtis was here. Curtis Copeland, whose father was also Curtis Copeland. Curtis, hey, Curtis, there you are. I'm going to spotlight your video. How are you?
Doing well today.
Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for inviting me.
You and I have talked before about how important this anniversary coming up tomorrow is. We originally had planned an event. You and I, actually, you're the one who really kind of convinced me that we had to do it, to do a special event at the Heinz History Center on June 25th for the 70th anniversary of the beginning of the Korean War, where we heard, Korean War veterans kind of sharing their stories. And, it didn't happen. The Heinz History Center is closed. We've had to have all our events go virtual. And then I saw you last night at the Bridgeville Historical Society, and I'm very glad that you are willing to join us because I know that your father served in the Navy Corps as a Navy corpsman with the Marine Corps in Korea, correct?
Correct.
Did he talk much about it?
Not until much later in his life. I was surprised. One day I was just sitting in the living room with him and all kinds of stories just started pouring out that he must have been holding inside of him for at least 30, 40 years.
Being a corpsman has to my mind, being a corpsman or a medic has to be one of the hardest jobs because you're not a combatant officially, but you are in the middle of it. You're in the middle of combat, saving people and making decisions, right?
That's what they would have, Red Cross.
Often, yes, life and death decisions. Often he talked about giving morphine shots to soldiers. That was all that he could do. Just cradle them in his arms and see them off. He actually got there about the time that you described as the static phase in the war. He was there maybe from March of 51 till June or July of 52.
Okay.
And he's seen an awful lot of things. He talked often about human wave attacks, how often that him as a corpsman, according to the Geneva Convention, he wasn't even supposed to be armed. But if the other side didn't pay attention and shot corpsmen, then the United States also didn't have to honor the Geneva Convention. So he never went anywhere without his pistol and his rifle. And he said he shot that rifle off plenty times.
Wow.
Once he told me that I almost wasn't born a lot of times is how he actually described the combat situation there.
Yeah, meaning right. He almost didn't come home. And it's amazing to me how you could have these unbelievable experiences that are kind of beyond words like your father had, and just keep it to yourself for so long. But I guess
I understand that there's a lot of veterans like that, and especially with the Korean War, because when they came back, they were not heroes like the war, like the soldiers that came back from World War I and World War II. Many people couldn't even point to Korea on the globe and tell you where it was. So it was not a big deal when he came back. There was no parade, like the other gentleman said. First Baptist Church in Bridgeville did throw a little party for him, a little gathering for him when he came back, but he said that was about it.
And I know he passed away like 4 years ago, and boy, it would have been wonderful to have him kind of share his story in person at our events. Did he talk at all? We were just mentioning how during the Korean War that, you know, the military was in this nether zone of still some of it segregated, some of it racially integrated. Did your father, he was attached to the 1st Marine Division, which was racially integrated, correct?
Correct.
And did he talk a lot about that issue, about, you know, racism, racial discrimination, segregation in the military?
As you say, it's interesting how he perceived his military service. He would not say anything bad about the service, period, ever. I specifically asked him, Dad, did you experience racism while you were in Korea? And he would say yes, but he would not describe it to me. He would not tell me what he actually felt or experienced. I guess he didn't want it to affect me. But he did say that some of the Black units there had inferior weapons. Sometimes they were placed in places in the lines that they weren't happy with, that they felt they were being targeted. But he himself never said a bad word about his experience in the military.
Isn't that amazing? So did he identify himself too as a Marine, because he did serve with the Marines as a corpsman also?
Yes, he did. He felt that he was a corpsman, but he was trained as an operating technician. And when he found out he was going to Korea, he thought initially he was going to be on a hospital ship offshore Korea. The military had different plans for him, though. And there was a need for corpsmen because a lot of the corpsmen, and at the beginning of the war, casualties were so high on our side that they decided to attach him to the 1st Marine Division. He got 6 weeks extra training in learning how to shoot. And they also gave him some additional physical training so that he could keep up with the Marines. But then they shipped him on and put him on a ship and shipped him off to Korea.
I know you've done a lot of research about your father's service, and I think you have other photos, and you've given presentations on your father's service, because this was I think a fascinating thing for you to learn about, you know, later in life. If you could come on sometime again and talk more about your dad and what you learned about his service and about the service of other African Americans in Korea.
I'd be glad to.
That'd be wonderful. Thank you, Curtis, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
This is so terrific. Yes.
Todd, Rosetta mentioned in our chat that a part of the Black Military Women Foundation, and on her board, Lorraine West served in the Korean War. And I don't know if I could share my screen to pop that up there, but I didn't know if Rosetta wanted to say a few words about Lorraine as well.
Rosetta, how are you? Let's spotlight you, Rosetta. Let's see. Okay, how are you, Rosetta?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Good, except I only see half of your head. No, that's
yes,
better.
I took the screen.
That's
okay.
better. That's better.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, tell me what you wanted to share here.
I mentioned that I belong to the Black Military Women Foundation, that I was a co-founder for it. And one of the ladies that helped me with that, Lorraine West, was in the Korean War. And I was asking if there was a way to link her story so that you could actually read what she said, since she's not on the program today.
Yes, that would be wonderful. Sean, is the story on the, oh, there it is.
Got it. Good. Thank you.
Very good. Maybe if we could put this link in the chat, Sean, so people can read about Lorraine West.
That is a PDF online. So I have linked here that you can go right to their board member website. You scroll to the bottom and you can click on Lorraine West's picture and that'll pop up her story right on your screen.
Wonderful. So I do see that in the chat that people
Thank
could
you. Thank you.
that link and
Beautiful.
get to it. Thank you, Rosetta, for linking us to that. And I want to go to this right here. This is a Korean War Memorial, and I want to spotlight my good friend Jim Jameson, who I know is on here. Jim, where are you? Why can't I ever find anybody when I want to find them? There you are. Jim, I'm going to spotlight you here. How are you, Jim? I'm going to unmute you. How are you, Jim? There we go.
Yeah.
How are you?
Fine.
Good. I want to let people know about the Korean War Veterans Memorial and the registry that they have. So anybody who served in Korea during the war when the shooting was happening can be registered for the with the Korean War Veterans Memorial. They could go to KoreanWarVetsMemorial.org and do it themselves. Or if they want assistance, they could just contact you, correct?
Yeah, I'll be happy to help them. The Korean War Memorial is totally free. You can include a picture of your time in service, and it not only includes the time during the police action, but if you have served in Korea since then, you're entitled to be registered at the memorial.
Wonderful. And could you put, I don't know if you're able to put maybe your email and your phone number if people want to contact you about it. You know, if they get it's on the screen, absolutely. But I'm going to take it off the screen shortly. So if you could if you want to put your information in the chat for everybody.
Sure, be happy to.
Thank you very much, Jim. Yeah, Jim has been registering veterans with the World War II Memorial, the Women Veterans Memorial, the Korean War Veterans Memorial, and other service-oriented memorials for years now, helping people get registered. I know that you just registered Roland Glenn. Yes. Hey, Roland, how are you? In Kittery, Maine. I know Jim registered you whether you liked it or not. So that's great. I'm going to go to Bob Harbula. I'm so happy we have Bob. There you go. I'm so happy we have Bob on the program. Hi, Bob. I'm going to unmute you here if I can. Let's see here. Trying there. I'm having trouble finding to unmute.
How about me?
There we go. There we go. Perfect. How are you doing, Bob?
Good. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Thank you for joining us here.
Glad to be here, Todd.
This is Bob Harbula. He served in the Marine Corps. He seemed to be everywhere in Korea. He was at the landing at Incheon. He was at the Battle of Seoul. He was in the Chosin Reservoir. And on the story goes. You were a machine gunner, right, Bob?
Yeah, that was my job.
What made you want to join the Marine Corps?
I think it goes back to Second World War. Going to a parade where Mitchell Page was a Medal of Honor winner, one of the first Medal of Honor winners in the war. And they had a parade for him up in West Mifflin. And I think he's the only one that ever got the medal. But I was so enamored by how he sat there on the back, on the boot of the convertible and waving. And I said, man, and then I read what he did. And I said, could I do that? Someday, maybe I'll get a chance.
Yeah.
And I was lucky. I'm one of the lucky ones.
Oh man, I don't know if I'd call it lucky, Bob, but we'll talk about that. I mean, you saw a lot of ugly combat that
a lot of people don't know how bad the combat was in Korea. In the Second World War, the 1st Division 1st Marine Division, got 3 Presidential Unit Citations. And the Presidential Unit Citation is required the same qualifications as a Navy Cross, which is the 2nd highest award. Well, when your division does it or your outfit does it, it has to be above and beyond everybody else's performance. And so in the Second World War, they got 3 for Guadalcanal, Peleliu, and Okinawa in the whole war. In Korea, we got 3 in the first 7 months.
Huh.
When I got there, we got it for Incheon, Seoul, the Chosin Reservoir, and the Chinese Spring Offensive in 1951.
Your story of landing at Incheon, and for people to describe it to people, as you saw with the map, the North Koreans had pushed the South Koreans all the way down to the southern tip of the Korean Peninsula, to the city of Pusan, right at the southern tip. And the only thing that the South Koreans were able to control, and the UN forces, the US forces were able to control for a while, was the Pusan perimeter. But there was an attempt to push the North Korean army back up the peninsula. And General Douglas MacArthur came up with an ingenious plan to land troops at Incheon, which was on the same parallel as Seoul, up in the northern part of South Korea, up near the 38th parallel, to kind of, cut off, trap the North Koreans in the southern part of the peninsula. So landing at Incheon was a really big operation, an Army division, a Marine division. You were there. You were there, Bob. You were part of the landing. Tell us what you remember about the landing at Incheon.
Well, the Army was kind of there. The first Marine Division went in, and then the Army came in after we made the landing, and they were like our flank when we were going into Seoul, just in case there was some North Koreans on our flanks. So the Army screened for us.
But Bob, the thing that you told me once that I'll never, ever forget was that those ladders that people could see in the picture here, you made those ladders aboard ship.
Right. Yeah, when we boarded ship, the LSTs in Japan, and they were Japanese manned LSTs. They didn't speak English or understand what we were saying. We didn't understand them. But the LST is equipped to handle about a company of Marines. And on our LSTs, there was like 3 companies. There was no place to sleep. When we got on board there, we saw all these 2x4s sitting there. We said, what the hell are we going to do? Build houses? And he said, no, you're going to build ladders. I said, ladders for what? Well, we weren't going in on a beach, and there was no training for this. None of us, no Marine had ever trained to go attack a seawall. And that's what we had to do. We had to climb up that seawall, up the ladder, and get after the people that had and it was easy for their machine gunners to get at us because, it's a straight shot.
Yeah.
So you have to get moving. And that's when I saw my first casualty, Marine casualty, was he got to the top of the ladder and started cutting the barbed wire. And he got a ricochet in his neck. And I was the next man in line off the ladder, and I watched him die.
Oh,
and,
boy.
That sobered me up. I said, wait a minute. John Wayne movies were never like this.
That's right. And that was just the beginning.
Yeah, that started it.
That started it.
That was the last thing MacArthur did good in the war. Because after that, he went downhill fast, and he got away with it. He got thousands of GIs killed. And that bothered me for a long, long time. I couldn't understand what happened here. The North Koreans were not much trouble for us, the Marines. We could handle anything they had to throw at us. But what MacArthur did right after we took Seoul created what's wrong with Korea today, that it's still, the North Koreans are still in business.
So this is getting us to something that I want to turn to. Bob, as you can see, is a man of strong opinions, strongly held. And I know that you recently wrote an article about your evaluation of General Douglas MacArthur in the Korean War. And you submitted it to this magazine here, which is the Korean Veterans Magazine. And you very kindly shared with me, you have an article in the current issue of Korean War Veterans Magazine. And it's about a kind of a little known action called the ambush here at Maejong-ni. And you were there for the first ambush at Maejong-ni. And you write the story of it here. And what I did is I scanned the story and I put it here on the Zoom side in the chat. So if people want to read it, open it, save it, and read it, please do. It's a fascinating read about an ambush right outside the city of Wonsan, Korea. Tell us about that ambush.
Our battalion had landed at Wonsan, and we were sent up into the hills to guard a crossroad town to catch any North Korean soldiers trying to escape further north. And after about a week there, we'd taken about 1,500 prisoners, and we didn't have accommodations for them. So they wanted to get the prisoners down to the regimental headquarters down at Wonsan, so that that would free us up to do what we had to do up there. And we were only there a short period of time, but we loaded these guys up, the prisoners, as many as we could. I think about 500 we were going to take down on the 10 trucks. And we were hoping on the way down that they might try something, get away or something, and we could have a field day with them. But unfortunately, they were so docile and tired and wore out, they didn't want nothing to do with fighting us. The reason why we were like that was that in the Battle of Seoul, after we took Seoul, we went on some scouting missions, and we came across GIs with their hands tied behind their back, shot in the head, women and children shot in trenches, South Korean women and children. And we put the word out.
Yeah.
No quarter. We see a North Korean, we're going to kill him. We're not taking prisoners. Well, we got these prisoners up at Maejong-ni. We didn't catch them. They were caught by other members of the battalion. But we were taking them down, and so that was our attitude towards the North Koreans, because we didn't like them at all.
I know they were, but at this point, they were a pretty raggedy bunch when you got the North Koreans. They were cold and hungry and tired.
Right, docile, tame. They were happy to be captured.
Right.
So we got them off our hand, and on the way back, it was getting real cold up in Korea. People don't know how cold Korea gets, but it was starting to get real cold, and we didn't have cold weather gear. And so the word was that cold weather gear was coming in at Wonsan on the ships, and we would pick up our cold weather gear and on a return trip, bring it up to Maejong-ni where we were. And on the way back at the top of one of the hills, the North Koreans, about 200 of them, had set up an ambush for the trucks. And so I was on the third truck, and that's when the ambush started. Some North Koreans came out from behind boulders along the road and opened up with their Bert guns. And these are Russian-made submachine guns. And the two guys I was sitting with on the tailgate got hit next to me. And because I was the furthest away from the shooters, I didn't get hit. But we rolled in unison off the trucks. And I kept rolling to a small berm on the road where it dropped into the valley below. And the three trucks continued going up around the bend, and I didn't know what happened there. And our other trucks that were behind us pulled over to the edge of the hill, and the men got out and started returning fire from a skirmish line. And I'm laying there, and I don't know what to do. I'm not hit, and I don't see anybody to shoot at except down in the valley. And a friend of mine, Sergeant Bob Hurt, was on the second truck, and the lieutenant was in the first truck. And so I said, I'm going to go up there and see if I can help them or do something for them. My best action would have been going over to the skirmish line where it was, right across the road and up the hill a little bit. But I had this feeling for my friend, Bob Hurt. And I never knew this guy before we formed a division in Frisco a few weeks ago. So I went up there, and here I saw that the boulders had been placed out on the road. Big boulders were put on the road, and these North Koreans were, there was about 5 of them standing up in the front, and all the bodies were laying around the trucks dead, like they were dead. And so I knew my buddy was in the second truck, so he was riding in the jump seat where our sergeants and officers ride. And I worked my way up using the trucks for a screen, and I saw that he was shot in his shoulder very bad. He couldn't get up off the seat, and the driver was down with him, hunkered down by the wheel well. And I said, can you get this truck turned around? Because I knew I couldn't carry him out. He would make noise, and it would be too painful. So the driver assured me that he can do that. And so I said, okay, I'm going to go in to tell the driver of the third truck that what we're doing and to get ready to move when I get up there. And on the way up, I had seen our machine gun was on the second truck, on sitting on the boxes up there. And the gunner and the assistant gunner were both killed. They were lying on the ground nearby. So I said, well, the only thing I can do is get up there, open up with the machine gun, and give them protection while they turn these 2 trucks around to get out of there. And I got that done. I couldn't set the machine gun up on the boxes because it would jump all over the place with the tripod. So I had to hold it and shoot it like John Wayne would do from the hip. Of course, I didn't think of it at that time. I just had to do what I had to do. And so I tapped on the cab and motioned to the driver to get started and let's move. And I stood up with the machine gun and took out 3 of the soldiers, North Koreans, and got the trucks turned around. And then other soldiers started coming in to help them, and kept up the fire until we got out of there. And well, I was the last man remaining in my squad that had landed at Incheon after this battle.
Wow.
And so I became the squad leader. I was still a PFC.
You were a PFC squad leader.
Yeah, and I had no training to be a squad leader.
Wow.
I go to special schools. I was a spit and polish Marine at 8th and I. All we did was hold burials for the Second World War dead at Arlington, and guard the president when he went into different venues, or when he went to Camp David. We'd go up 2 days before he would and check out everything to make sure it's nice and safe, and things like that, ceremonial type details. So I was there 2 years at 8th and I, and John Wayne made the movie Sansa Iwo Jima. And I told my buddy, after watching John Wayne 6 times in 2 days, the Sansa Iwo Jima 6 times in 2 days, I said, I need a war. Because I was like, there has to be more. How am I going to try to be a hero without trying? You got to have a chance. So soon after that, the Korean War started. And I was one of the first ones to volunteer at 8th and I to go to Korea, which turned out to be the best thing I ever did in the Marine Corps.
Why? How could you say that? I mean, if people knew your whole story, if they read the book about your company, Bloody George G Company.
But if they knew what they gave me, See, the volunteers, anybody volunteered to go to Korea would get a special 10-day leave that wouldn't be charged to them. And they would be flown out to San Diego and join up and make well, at that time, they were only considering making a Raider battalion. But then the stuff hit the fan in Korea, and MacArthur wanted the division Marines to make the landing at Incheon. So things changed. So I got 10 days, and my buddies back at the base got nothing. They got 24 hours to ship their stuff home and get on a cattle train. And they swore about that cattle train. Had no air conditioning. It was in June, and they're sweating, and all that dirt's coming in on them from the engine. And it was the trip of misery, they said.
I see what you're saying now about that volunteering got you those free 10 days. You know, we're coming to the end of our program, and your story is such an important one and such a big one. I want to have you back on to talk about, again, the landing at Incheon, the Battle of Seoul, and then especially, of course, the Battle of the Chosin Reservoir, which you were at and which you fought through. And the 70th anniversary of all those things is coming up in a few months.
Sure.
I would love to have you back on to share more of your story. I do want to encourage people to read the story that you wrote for, again, this magazine, Korean Veterans Magazine here. It is the story of the ambush at Maisonni, and really a fascinating read, Bob. I'm just, and you have two more in the pipeline, don't you? And one on MacArthur that will be published next time.
Right.
Okay. Well, we look forward to that.
The sad thing, Todd, is I couldn't even get into college when I came back. They told me I had to go back and get 2 more years of English and a year of literature if I wanted to go to Pitt.
You're kidding me.
They wouldn't even give me an entrance exam. And I graduated, from a vocational school.
Right.
I was a pattern maker, never used that. But I learned how to build things out of wood, especially ladders.
You learned how to write also, because you're a fine writer. I mean, you tell a wonderful story, Bob.
It's very easy writing about what you did, because you know what happened and the story is there. I wrote 5 articles for the magazines, war magazines, and they were all things that happened to me in service, things that I was involved with. And I often wondered how my life would have been different if there would have been witnesses. Yeah. The guys that could witness what I did at Maisonni were all in the hospital back in the States. I never saw them for 40 years. Yeah. So, what are you going to do?
And one of them remembered you shooting from the hip, but didn't know your name. Didn't know your name.
Who I was.
Right.
He wasn't in my company. Well, he wasn't in my squad.
Right.
And at that time, we had trouble learning who the new members were, because we had so many casualties that just trying to learn who your new squad members are and teaching them their assignments.
Right.
So there's always a lot of things.
Thank you, Bob, for joining us today and sharing just a tiny little bit of your story. And we definitely want to have you back on. And I definitely want people who are on the Zoom side here to open up and read the story about the ambush at Maisonni. Thank you, Bob. And thank you. And I also want to have make sure that we get Ken Kazak back on to talk about his dad, Handsome Harry's experience being the 500,000th replacement troop in the Korean War, and how feted he was for that. That's a great story. Curtis, we want to have you back on for sure. Before we go, I want to, and also Bert, we want to have Bert tell his story, but I want Bert to kind of maybe pay brief tribute here to a Korean War veteran we lost recently, Ed Stevens. Bert, you were friends with Ed.
Ed Stevens.
A good write-up in the paper this morning about him.
Yes. Yeah, that's why I bring it up. He was really instrumental in getting the Korean War Memorial built in Pittsburgh.
Exactly. He did it he started in 1991, and they finished the first memorial in around 1999. Then they rededicated it after the new stadium was built. And now it's sort of a forgotten memorial, like the Forgotten War, because no one can see it. The stadium's sort of in the way.
Yeah, it's
What
kind
you
of
see behind me now is a list of all the donors, and then a list of all the people who died from the war is in gold on the far corner.
if you live in Western Pennsylvania, if you live near Pittsburgh, it is worth a trip to the North Shore to see this memorial. It's an absolutely beautifully designed and landscaped memorial. I mean, it's really a hidden treasure on the North Shore, I think. Absolutely worth the visit. And Ed Stevens, whose obituary is in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette today, was instrumental in getting it created. And Bert, I want to have you back on to talk about balloons sometime. Right?
Yeah.
Weather balloon.
The one they put up my chest to blow out the blockage, right?
Yes. And I'm glad that you dragged Don McElrath here today.
Me too.
Good. Thank you for bringing him. And I hope he joins us again and you join us again. And thank you to everybody who watched on the Facebook side, on the Zoom side. Thank you for the veterans who shared the stories. I look forward to seeing some of you. Please do join us tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. for our VBC Coffee Hour. Everybody is welcome to join us. Thank you all. Thank you for another wonderful program. And see you all soon.
Hi,
Take
thanks,
care.
everyone.
Hi, everybody.